Rogue Loops is a roguelite that blends the tight combat of Hades with the strategic risk-reward of Loop Hero. You play as the Velmont family, a cursed clan fighting through ever-shifting loops where every power-up comes with the price. It doesn't have many moving parts, but that primarily works in its favor. It's fast, flashy, and unapologetically punishing. I'ma break it down for you. First, let's talk premise so you're not out of the loop. Don't let it throw you for a loop, it's painfully simple. You get the gist by looking at the game and its symbol. In combat, you gotta use your brain and be nimble. Find loopholes to whittle the loop's hold till it wanes and it dwindles. Because see, the Velmonts aren't your typical heroes. They're a family of hunters who sought immortality only to find it's a curse. After fighting through scores of monsters, they eventually discover an ancient portal, only to become trapped in an endless loop. Forced to battle monsters and other abominations, they work to break free of the infinite loop's curse. And that's pretty much it. The narrative's sparse, no grand drama here, but the setup works. The rest of the game doesn't really expand on it past the initial introduction. Similarly, the characters, family, and NPCs have dialogue but provide close to zero narrative context. The story boils down to escape or die trying, and then come back again. In terms of gameplay mechanics, at its core, Rogue Loops is about balancing buffs and curses. Each stage or biome is split into two halves. Clear a wave of enemies in one half, pick a buff like plus 5% crit chance, a relic, or a lightning nova spell, then choose between two curses and repeat until you reach the boss. Such curses include enemies drop a bomb on death, a ghostly skull that relentlessly chases you to inflict a fear status effect, or slower movement speed after dashing, to name a few. Most curse choices are stage traps, player debuffs, or buffs for the enemies. If you play your cards right, you can shape a more manageable run, putting you in a flow state. It's a brilliant push and pull. You're constantly weighing short-term power against long-term survival. It's even possible to pick a combination of stage buffs that completely negate your build or lack thereof. In the early game, it's a steep learning curve due to not knowing which curses are the more destructive ones. On top of that, this isn't a game where you can get away with button mashing and hoping for the best. Understanding each character's playstyle, what the enemies do, when to dash, and what relics and spells synergize well requires deliberate planning and flexibility. You might think that's obvious, but I know there are some masochistic players out there who try to brute force everything. I'm talking to you, Kevin. Combat itself is slick and aggressive. Each character's core ability is on a cooldown, but spells aren't. Instead, you recharge them by landing a predetermined number of basic attacks. For example, casting a meteor requires hitting enemies 12 times before casting it again, though there is a relic that reduces the number of hits needed. It forces you into a rhythm: slash, dash, cast, repeat. On top of that, if you release the spell button at the right time, you get a perfect cast, which usually improves the damage and effects of the spell, such as casting 2 fireballs instead of 1. While the combat is frantic, you eventually get into a rhythm, almost like a dance. A dance where you finally learn how to two-step properly without stepping on the 1 and 3 instead of on the 2 and 4. Enemy variety keeps you on your toes. The first biome's swampy forest crawls with spit-launching slimes, vomiting treants, and spinning spiky Koopas. The second scorched fiery biome contains flame demons that'll chase you down, bomb-throwing goblins, and enemies that remind me of the Fallen from the Diablo games. There's also a snowy tundra biome and an ethereal void in the final stage. Each zone forces new tactics: dodging projectiles, breaking line of sight, utilizing the terrain, or prioritizing elites. It's not revolutionary, but it's polished and requires quick thinking. As far as bosses go, while not some of my favorites I've ever fought in a video game, they are still pretty challenging, especially early on. There are 4 of them, each thematically appropriate for their biome. They have a relatively telegraphed moveset that you can learn to avoid getting sent to the Shadow Realm. Pretty swiftly though, they become more tedious than anything once you've discovered the power of lightning builds like I did, and can melt their health bars even on greater difficulties. In that regard, the novelty and variety of boss fights wear down relatively quickly. The only slight saving grace is that, besides the final boss, the higher difficulties have variants of the biome's bosses with partially changed movesets to spice it up. And I'll also say that the snow biome's boss is probably the most annoying one to deal with because you have to destroy 4 different enemies before it's targetable. Overall, the fights leading up to the boss were way more compelling. Okay, let's talk about the different characters and build variety. You start with Aiden, the Sun, a sword and shield bruiser who can block attacks or spin a spear for crowd control. After that, you unlock Amber, the daughter, next, a bow wielder who recalls arrows like a deadly boomerang or stacks explosives on enemies. The father, Gabriel, is all raw melee power, while the mother, Circe, slings mid-range blood magic, whose basic attack has minor AoE damage. Each feels distinct, though ranged options like Circe and especially Amber have a clear edge. It feels like the melee-focused characters take longer to get their rhythm going. Finding openings for melee attacks can be frustrating since you're constantly moving, avoiding hazards, and maneuvering around enemies. I definitely had more deaths playing as either Aiden or Gabriel. Amber is 100% the strongest character in the game. Her range, attack speed, high crit chance, and alternate unique ability have helped me complete more runs than any other character. Also, once I started going exclusively for lightning spells and relics, enemies couldn't ever move unless I was careless. It's pretty satisfying to tweak their playstyles, but the real magic comes from relics within runs, which can have either ice, fire, or lightning elemental effects. You get these as reward choices between rooms or by spending gold at the merchant. They add effects such as dashes grant brief invincibility after dashing, or tornadoes on every third attack. Combine these with spells like frost novas or flame dashes and you'll feel like a badass spellblade. In terms of progression and replayability, meta progression is handled through a talent tree where you spend essence to unlock global buffs that affect all characters, gold gain, crit damage, revives, etc., and you can rotate the tiers within to tailor your strategy. However, many of the upgrades aren't particularly interesting or build defining. Between runs, you invest souls to upgrade each character's core abilities and permanently raise passive stats such as attack damage, crit chance, or max HP. For example, Aiden's shield block will do more damage the more attacks you block, Amber's arrows will detonate and restore her HP, to name a couple. You can see how Amber becomes OP pretty quickly. Beat the final boss and you unlock greater difficulties that slap preset curses on your runs, but provide more significant essence gains and souls. It works a little differently than I first thought. It initially confused me because the game didn't explain it. Choosing the difficulty doesn't make the entire run that difficulty. Instead, you can select the difficulty for each biome. For example, you could put all the biomes on hard, or make the first biome hard, the second nightmare, and the third normal. Why would you do this, you might ask? Well, first, stop asking stupid questions. Second, you must beat the bosses to accrue more souls for leveling up the characters. Once you've beaten a boss on any given difficulty, it'll no longer reward souls if you repeat that boss on the same difficulty. So you have to win on higher settings to receive more souls for leveling up. It's a smart way to extend replayability, though I worry about longevity. After about 15 hours, maybe less, I'd reached the top of the talent tree and fully upgraded Amber's alternate ability. At that point, the replayability lies in filling out the other talent tree tiers and maxing out the different characters. Still, for the most part, the core loop stayed addictive thanks to the Velmont's unique quirks and the ever-present one more run temptation. As I said, the talent tree's rotating tiers let you specialize just a bit more. One section of a tier might focus on gold farming, the other crit builds, and another on increasing survivability. It's not Path of Exile levels of insane, but it's somewhat satisfying to unlock a new tier and try something different. As far as visuals and sound go, Rogue Loops is stunning. Each biome is carefully designed. A murky forest choked with vines, a lava arena glowing like a forge fire, a frozen tundra where snow blankets the architecture, and a surreal purple void that feels ripped from a cosmic nightmare. The art style isn't particularly innovative, but it's cohesive and detailed, a dark fantasy comic book brought to life. The soundtrack swells during boss fights with orchestral urgency and is really well composed, though in the early release build I hit a bug where the final biome's music dropped entirely, leaving the climax eerily silent. It's a minor gripe, but it undercut the tension just a bit. On the flip side, the sound design is crisp. Arrows thunk, swords swish, and meteors crash with weight. As tightly packaged as this game is, there are some rough edges. Dash physics can glitch near walls, throwing you into danger if you're not careful. Spells occasionally bug out. I once lost my lightning nova for an entire biome. And the story, it's threadbare. NPCs exist to sell upgrades, not lore. Also, the lack of endgame build variety becomes apparent even after unlocking more relics. But the biggest issue is balance. Melee characters like the Father or the Son and the Holy Spirit struggle compared to the daughter's safe, explosive range and crit damage. Here's hoping future patches tighten these screws. Now for my final thoughts. Rogue Loops doesn't reinvent the roguelite, but it does refine it. It's a tight package with few bells and whistles, which is fine. The buff curse system is a masterclass in risk reward, the combat is kinetic, and the art style bleeds personality. It's a love letter to Hades and Loop Hero fans, even if the narrative feels like a postscript. It's definitely for those who love roguelites like I do and want a tightly packaged game that knows what it wants to be. Otherwise, if roguelites aren't your thing, then this probably won't change your mind. Anyway, that's the game Rogue Loops. Thanks for watching. Let me know if this game tickles your fancy, or if you've played other games with a similar loop mechanic. I'd love to hear about them. And if you enjoyed this review, a like or subscribe helps the channel grow. Catch you in the next loop, and peace out.